Hey guys, Slick77 back with another book to read. This will be the first one. The one I'm going to read is called The Thief, and you can find it down here in Bleak Falls, Barrow. And what it does, when you find it, it looks like this, and you increase your lock-picking skill. Let's get to it. Thief by Reven. If the reader has not yet had the pleasure of reading the first volume in these series on the life of Eslaf Errol Beggar, he should close this book immediately, for I shan't recap. I will tell you this much, gentle reader: when we last saw Elaf, he was a boy, an orphan, a failed beggar, running through the wild winter woods of Skyrim. Away from his home of Irolgard, he continued running, stopping here and there for many more years, until he was a young man. Eslaf discovered that among the ways of getting food, asking for it was the most troublesome. Far easier was finding it in the wilderness, or taking it from unguarded market stalls. The only thing worse than begging to get food was begging for the opportunity to work for the money to buy it. That seemed needlessly complicated. No, as far as Eslaf was concerned, he was best off being a scavenger, a beggar, and a thief. He committed his first act of thievery shortly after leaving Irolgard, on the southernwards of Tambrakar in the rugged land near Mount Jesnin, just east of the village of Horbild. Eslaf was starving, having not eaten anything but a rather scrawny raw squirrel in 4 days, and he smelled meat cooking and then found the smoke. A band of minstrel bards was making camp. He watched them from the bushes as they cooked and joked and flirted and sang. He could have asked them for some food, but so many of the others had refused him before. Instead, he rushed out, grabbed a piece of meat from the fire, and wincing from the burns, scrabbled up the nearest tree to devour it while the bard stood under him and laughed. "What is your next move, thief?" giggled a fair red-headed woman who was covered with tattoos. "How do you intend to disappear without us catching you and punishing you?" As the hunger subsided, Eslaf realized she was right. The only way to get out of the tree without falling in their midst was to take the branch down to where it hung over a creek. It was to drop off a cliff of about 50 feet that seemed like the wisest strategy, so Eslaf began crawling in that direction. "Do you know how to fall, boy?" called out the young Khajiit, but a few years older than Eslaf, thin but muscular, graceful in his slightest movements. "If you don't, you should just climb down here and take what's coming to you. It's idiotic to break your neck when we just give you some bruises and send you on your way." "Of course I know how to fall," Eslaf called back. But he didn't. He just thought the trick of falling was to have nothing underneath you and let nature take its course. But 50 feet up, when you're looking down, is enough to give anyone pause. "I'm sorry to doubt your abilities, Master Thief," said the Khajiit, grinning. "Obviously you know to fall feet first with your body straight to lose, but avoid cracking like an egg. It seems you are destined to escape us." Eslaf wisely followed the Khajiit's hints and leapt to the river, falling without much grace but without hurting himself. In the years that followed, he had to make several more drops from even greater heights, usually after a thief, sometimes without water beneath him, and he improved the basic technique. When he arrived in the western town Agelium, the morning of his 21st birthday, it didn't take him long to find out who was the richest person most deserved of being burgled. An impregnable palace in a park near the center of town was owned by a mysterious young man named Soyobud. Eslaf wasted no time in finding the palace and watching it. A fortified palace, he had come to learn, was like a person, with quirks and habits beneath its hard shell. It was not an old place. Evidently, whatever money this Soyobud had come into was fairly recent. It was regularly patrolled by guards, implying that the rich man was fearful of being burgled. With good reason. The most distinctive feature of the palace was its tower, rising 100 feet above the stone walls, doubtless giving the occupant a good defensive view. Eslaf guessed that if Soyobud was as paranoid as he guessed him to be, the tower would also provide a view of the palace storehouse. The rich man would want to keep an eye on his fortune. That meant that the loot couldn't be directly beneath the tower, but somewhere in the courtyard within the walls. The light in the tower shone all night long, so Eslaf boldly decided the best time to burgle was by the sound of day, when Soyabud must sleep. That would be the time the guards would least expect a thief to pounce. And so, when the noon sun was shining over the palace, Eslaf quickly scaled the wall near the front gate and waited, hidden in the crenellations. The interior courtyard was plain and desolate, with few places to hide, but he saw that there were 2 wells. One the guards used from time to time to draw water and slake their thirst, but Eslaf noticed that the guards would pass by the other well, never using it. He waited until the guards were distracted, just for a second, by the arrival of a merchant in a wagon, bearing goods for the palace. While they were searching his wagon, Eslaf leapt, elegantly, feet first, from the wall into the well. It was not a particularly soft landing, for, as Eslaf had guessed, the well was not full of water, but gold. Still, he knew how to roll after a fall, and he didn't hurt himself. In the dank subterranean storehouse, he stuffed his pockets with gold and about to go to the door which he assumed would lead to the tower, when he noticed a gem the size of an apple, worth more than all the gold that was left. Eslaf found room for it down his pants. The door did indeed lead to the tower, and Eslaf followed its curving stairwell up, walking quietly but quickly. At the top he found the master of the palace's private quarters, ornate and cold, with invaluable artwork and decorative swords and shields on the walls. Eslaf assumed the snoring lump under the sheets was Soyabud, but he didn't investigate too closely. He crept to the windows and looked out. It was going to be a difficult fall for certes. He needed to jump from the tower, past the walls, and hit the tree on the other side. The tree branch would hurt, but they would break his fall, and there was a pile of hay he had under the tree to prevent further injury. Eslaf was about to leap when the occupant of the room woke up with a start, yelling, "My gem!" Eslaf had stared at him for a second, wide-eyed. They looked alike, not surprising since they were brothers. Eslaf's arrow story is continued in the book Warrior. Now, I have not read any of the books before, so this will all be new to me as I read them to you, and I hope you join me for whatever next book I shall find and whatever next dungeon I go through. I'll see you there.